All right, guys, and let's jump right into this. Now, this is going to be the first video over the actual acquisition sales training. And this is the most important video, I believe, in starting this whole process, because a lot of the other videos are going to be super tactical. This is more strategic. And what do I mean by that? What I mean by that is this is a higher level framework. This framework is going to allow you to make really good decisions whenever you're talking to sellers and you're working deals and you're negotiating. Because at the end of the day, if you understand who you're communicating with and you understand who you're working with and you understand what type of seller you have on the other line, the better decisions you make and the better you are at negotiating. So this first video is being a master communicator and understanding the seller avatars, okay? Generally speaking, there's about 5 different people that we work with on a day-to-day basis when it comes to sellers. Now, oftentimes they're gonna have a combination of a few different avatars, but predominantly they're gonna have one avatar that they lean towards the most, right? So for example, they might be a Mr. Control, but then they have a little bit of Captain Chaos in there as well. Or they might be a Mrs. Anxious with a little bit of, the ghost in there as well, right? But typically they're going to lean towards one of these avatars, probably call it 70% of the time. And when you're able to identify who the person is and kind of their general temperament, their general personality, their general way of operating in the world, then you can be adaptable. Because remember, that's going back to the mindset, right? Empathy, we're understanding who we're dealing with, we're understanding who the seller is. Being adaptable, adapting our communication to the seller so they can understand what we are saying and we can get into agreement with them. At the end of the day, closing deals is just getting into an agreement with somebody else. And it's a productive, agreement, right? It's a productive resolution to moving things forward. But to do that, you have to understand who you're talking to. So let's kind of jump right into this. The very first avatar is going to be Captain Chaos. Captain Chaos. Now, in the module here, there's going to be a bunch of text that's going to break down each avatar, and it's going to go into detail what their goals are, how they operate, kind of how they view the world, and some characteristics. What I'm going to do is just kind of go over some general characteristics. So for Captain Chaos, look for some signs of, they're disorganized, distracted, easily distracted, impulsive, right? So this is a seller that, you talked to them yesterday and they're good, they're happy. Today, they're calling you angry, right? Or you talked to them an hour ago and then, now they're blowing your phone up and they want to back out the deal, or they're demanding, or maybe they're demanding something, or they're just maybe, trying to change something up really, really quick. They tend to be impulsive. These things, they're probably going to be like this all the way to closing. So I think it's important to understand when you're dealing with these seller avatars, they're not going to change, right? They're not going to change overnight, and you're not going to be able to control them or try to change them. We don't want to control people. Number one, we can't control people. But number two, we just want to understand people, because they're going to be who they are all the way to the closing line. So it's very important that you understand that. They're overwhelmed, right? Captain Chaos may be overwhelmed. He may have a lot going on, or in his head is just, he can't put the pieces together. He's overwhelmed. And he's unpredictable, right? Captain Chaos is unpredictable. So these are some of the traits for Captain Chaos, unpredictable, overwhelmed, disorganized, easily distracted, and very impulsive. Okay, not a big deal. We can close the deal if they're Captain Chaos. It doesn't make them a bad person. It doesn't make them, not able to do a transaction. It's just their personality and their temperament. So that way you can coordinate your communication accordingly. All right, the next one's going to be easy peasy. Now, easy peasy. Now, most of the time, this seller avatar is fairly easy to work with. Now, there are complications for easy peasy, and it can happen. I'm going to go into the text here in the module, but here's some traits for easy peasy. Relaxed, right? Flexible, patient. They're typically pretty patient, pretty easygoing. They're not going to, put a lot of stress on you. Trustworthy, if they say something, they're probably telling the truth. They probably trust you. They probably, are letting you be the professional, let you handle the transaction. Generally speaking, they're optimistic, right? These are easy peasy sellers. Now, this is going to be the least likely person you're going to deal with. So out of the 5, you're probably going to encounter them maybe 10% of the time. So we don't have a lot of easy peasy. That's not the business that we're in. But sometimes you will get that seller who's easy peasy. And these are some traits to look out for, and typically the deals go fairly smooth. Now the third one's going to be Mr. Control. Okay, so Mr. Control. Now this person is probably going to be the most volatile and aggressive seller, right? Doesn't mean the deal won't happen. You'll still get the deal done, but remember, guys, it's understanding who we're working with. So what I like about seller avatars is it allows us to not take things so serious. And what I mean by that is we're not going to take their actions or their emotions or their feelings or their thoughts or their words so serious, and we're not going to take it personal to the heart. Sometimes if someone has a certain temperament and they fit into a certain avatar box, they're going to just kind of be who they are, and it's not even that deep, it's not even that serious. So Mr. Control, some of the things you're going to have here is obviously they're a control freak, right? They want to micromanage the details of a transaction. They may have you go through the contract 21 times before you're able to get the deal signed. So, sometimes they can be a control freak. They can be a little bit aggressive, right? So these are sellers that, they might be a little aggressive with their tone of voice, maybe with their words, maybe with their language, maybe with their actions, right? But, sometimes they're a little bit more, direct and aggressive. They're typically more detail oriented, right? Because they want to control the situation. They want to micromanage the situation. So they're typically going to hammer you on details a lot. And, don't take that as a sign of the deal's not going well. It's just part of how they process. And then they're going to have high expectations. So these are people that may have unrealistic expectations. It's important whenever you're working with Mr. Control that you're strong and firm and you have good boundaries. That way they don't overstep and start trying to take things sideways. Typically, they actually respond well to that. What's funny about Mr. Control or Mrs. Control is they actually respond well when you kind of, hold the line pretty good. So it's a sign of respect. They'll typically, because you're speaking their language, they understand what you're doing, and they typically go, they kind of go along with it. Now, the fourth person is going to be Mrs. or Mr. Anxious. I would probably say this is the most probable person you're going to see whenever you're working with sellers. You're going to see Mrs. Anxious, right? This person is going to be, I would probably say they probably make up 50% of the deals that we do, this personality type. They're going to be anxiety prone, okay? So by nature, they're going to be anxious, okay? Don't take it so serious, right? They're going to have days where they're kind of, anxious, maybe their communication, they're, anxiety filled when they're talking to you. This is just kind of their temperament overall. They're emotionally attached to the property. So this could be a challenge. Typically, they'll be a little bit more connected with the property, and they're looking at the property not from an objective business place, right? They're looking at the property from an emotional place, which typically means it's sentimental. It has less financial value and more sentimental and emotional value. So they typically tend to be a little bit emotionally attached to the property. Indecisive. This is going to be a big one. So Mrs. Anxious or Mr. Anxious is going to be indecisive. One day they're going to want to sell. The next day they're not going to want to sell. What's the truth? Well, what we want to do is we want to be objective in this situation. Did they sign the contract? If they did, we're moving forward. If they didn't, then they haven't taken action yet, and we just have to keep following up with them. But if you do put a Mrs. Anxious under contract, do not be surprised if 1 week later they call you and say, I don't want to do it. Don't take it so serious. It's part of their temperament. They're gonna do this all the way to closing. Seeking assurance, they want assurance. They want to make sure everything is going to be okay. They are anxiety prone by nature, so they want to make sure that things are going to be lined up and they feel safe and secure in the deal. Last but not least, the ghost. This is someone who may sign a contract with you and you don't talk to them for 2 weeks and then they'll show up for closing randomly. This could be a person that, you know, you're working a deal with, you're following up, and then all of a sudden they just stop answering the phone, right? These people are avoidant by nature. They're overwhelmed as well, kind of similar to Captain Chaos. Passive, they're passive. So these are sellers that are not going to be active participants. You're going to have to kind of nudge them along, and you're going to have to be the one who's proactive. They're not going to pick up the phone and call you. The ghost seller they will literally sabotage their own deal before they pick up the phone and call you. That's just their temperament. That's how they operate. You just have to understand who you're working with and communicate accordingly. Indecisive, also, they tend to be a little indecisive and disconnected. So, they're a ghost. They're kind of disconnected from the process. They're not, for whatever reason, they got their head in the sand. There's many different reasons. And guys, when I'm going over seller avatars, I'm not making moral judgments on these avatars. It's not about a good or a bad. It's just an is. We want to look at these as a professional, right? We're the pro, we're the professional. We want to be able to see who we're working with, and we want to be able to communicate to them accordingly. It's not about getting upset or getting emotional or judging a seller or nothing like that. What it's about is, okay, I'm dealing with a Captain Chaos. What does this person need from me right now so I can help move the deal forward? I'm dealing with a Miss Anxious. What does this person need from me right now so I can move the deal forward? It's always asking ourselves the question, what does the seller need from me right now to move the deal forward? That magical question will literally make you millions and millions of dollars in your lifetime. So always ask yourself, what does the person need? What does the seller need from me right now to move the deal forward? And these are your 5 seller avatars.